Alone, in the middle of a silent desert, a rancher spends his nights listening to the wind scrape against his old wooden cabin. For years, his world has been nothing but the endless sand, the lonely howl of coyotes, and the creak of a rocking chair on his porch. But one stormy night, everything changes. He hears a desperate knock at his door, sharp and trembling. His heart pounds, slowly. He opens it and freezes. Standing in the flickering lantern light are 10 young Apache girls, their faces pale with fear, clothes torn, shivering from the cold desert wind. They do not speak at first, only stare with eyes full of pleading and desperation. Finally, a soft voice breaks the silence. "Please, help us." In that single moment, the rancher realizes his quiet, empty life is about to collide with a story of danger, courage, and a night he will never forget. Far away from any town or road, a lone rancher lives in the heart of a vast desert where the sun burns by day and the wind whispers by night. His life is a pattern carved in silence. Each morning, he steps out into the golden sand to fix broken fences, feed his horses, and check the water troughs under the scorching sun. By afternoon, he mends tools in his dusty barn, the sound of hammering echoing against the empty horizon. When evening falls, he sits on his creaking wooden porch, staring at the endless dunes painted orange by the setting sun, listening to coyotes howl in the distance. He speaks to no one, for no one ever comes. The days are calm, the nights are quiet, yet the emptiness follows him like a shadow. He has chosen this life of solitude, but deep inside, he wonders if the desert will ever bring him something unexpected. That night, as darkness swallowed the desert, the rancher sat inside his dimly lit cabin, the faint glow of a lantern flickering against the wooden walls. While the wind howled like a restless spirit outside, a sudden clap of thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the old windows, and rain began to hammer the roof in wild, uneven bursts. He leaned back in his chair, listening to the storm rage across the empty land, when suddenly a sharp, desperate knock shattered the silence. His heart leaped. Nobody ever came here. For a moment he froze, staring at the door, the wind whistling through the cracks as if urging him to move. The knocking came again, louder, more frantic, carrying fear within each strike. Slowly, he grabbed the lantern, its flame trembling as much as his hand, and stepped to the door. When he opened it, the storm rushed in with a cold breath, and there, huddled against the darkness, were 10 young Apache girls. Their faces were pale under the stormy sky, their clothes soaked and torn, their small shoulders shaking from the cold and the fear that gripped them. The lantern's light reflected in their wide eyes, eyes that carried stories of terror and hope all at once. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. The rancher's mind spun with questions. Why were they here in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the night, knocking on his forgotten door? The tallest girl, barely a teenager, took a trembling step forward and whispered in a voice broken by exhaustion, "Please, shelter us." Her words were almost stolen by the wind, yet they cut straight into his chest. He stepped aside, letting the girls stumble in, dripping water onto his dusty wooden floor, their breaths coming fast and uneven as if they had run for miles. He shut the door against the roaring storm, and for the first time in years, his lonely cabin was filled with life, though not the kind he had ever imagined. The air was heavy with fear. The walls seemed to listen, and the rancher felt the weight of something unknown pressing on his chest. He gave them blankets, his hands moving instinctively, his mind still racing, his ears tuned to every crash of thunder outside, every whisper of wind through the cracks. The girls huddled near the fireplace, staring at him with silent gratitude, yet their faces still shadowed by something unsaid. The storm raged on, but inside that tiny cabin, a new kind of storm was building, a storm of questions, danger, and a night that the lonely rancher would never forget, a night that had only just begun. The storm outside roared through the night as the rancher moved quickly, grabbing blankets from an old chest and wrapping each shivering girl with care, the worn fabric soaking up the cold drops from their wet clothes. He fetched a rusty tin kettle, poured water into metal cups, and handed them out with trembling hands, the girls gulping it down as if it were the sweetest thing they had ever tasted. Then he offered what little food he had, a few pieces of cornbread and dried meat from a tin box, the smell of warmth and safety filling the cabin more than the food itself. The fire cracked and hissed, throwing light across their frightened faces, and the rancher, though silent, felt questions clawing at his mind. Who were they running from? Why did they knock on his door in the middle of the desert night? Slowly, the oldest girl, her dark hair clinging to her face from the rain, lifted her eyes to meet his. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They are coming, the raiders. They burned our camp. They will not stop until they find us." The words struck him like a blow. He froze, staring at the flickering shadows on the log walls, his heart pounding as the reality of their danger sank in. If the raiders were truly near, if they discovered the girls here, they would surely burn his cabin, maybe kill him for helping them. A cold shiver ran down his spine, yet when he looked back at the huddled figures by the fire, his fear tangled with something deeper compassion. He saw the smallest girl clutching a blanket to her chin, her tiny body shaking as tears slipped silently down her face, and the rancher knew he could not turn them away. But the weight of his choice pressed heavy on him. One decision could mean life or death. Every creak of the cabin, every roar of wind outside, felt like a warning. He stepped to the window, peering into the darkness, his reflection ghostly against the glass as lightning split the sky. But the desert beyond was empty, for now. Behind him, the girls whispered in their own tongue, fear lacing every syllable, while the rancher's mind wrestled between survival and humanity. He could feel his heartbeat in his hands as he gripped the edge of the window frame, knowing his quiet, solitary world had been shattered by this night, and the secret that now lived within his walls was as dangerous as the storm outside. The night stretched endlessly, and the storm outside began to quiet, leaving behind a haunting silence broken only by the long, distant howl of wolves and the low whistle of the desert wind against the cabin walls. The rancher sat in the corner of the room, his rifle across his lap, every muscle in his body tense, his ears tuned to every creak of the wooden floor and every whisper from the wind. The girls huddled close to the fire, their small faces lit by the flickering flames, eyes wide and wet with exhaustion, fear, and the faintest flicker of hope. He could see their tiny shadows trembling on the walls, and the sound of their soft breathing filled the room like a fragile melody. He wanted to close his eyes, to let sleep pull him away from the heavy thoughts pressing down on him, but his mind refused to rest. The raiders could come at any moment. Perhaps they were already out there, hidden in the darkness, watching his cabin, waiting for the right time to strike. Each gust of wind against the door felt like a hand trying to push its way inside, and each howl of the wolves seemed like a warning echoing through the emptiness of the desert. The rancher's chest tightened as he thought of what he had risked by letting them in. But when his eyes fell on the youngest girl, curled against her sister with the blanket pulled up to her chin, he knew he could never have done anything else. Hours passed like days. The fire crackled and hissed, and he added another log, watching the sparks jump into the smoky air. His ears caught a faint sound outside, maybe a branch snapping, or maybe footsteps in the sand, and his heartbeat thundered in his chest, the sound roaring in his own ears. He slowly rose to his feet, moving toward the window as quietly as he could, and peered into the night. The desert stretched out, silvered under the moonlight now that the storm had passed, empty and endless, but the feeling of being watched never left him. Behind him, the girls whispered softly, their voices trembling with fear, and one of them began to hum a quiet tune, almost like a prayer, which only made the night feel heavier, more fragile. The rancher gripped his rifle tighter, his knuckles white, his breath shallow, and he knew this night would not end in peace. He could feel it in the cold air, in the restless wind, in the way the shadows on the walls danced like ghosts. Somewhere out there in the desert, danger was moving, and he could only wait. Trapped in the longest and most fragile night of his life, when the first light of dawn spilled over the desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and rose, the rancher knew what he had to do. His heart was heavy but clear, and his hands, though tired, felt steady as he led the 10 girls out of the cabin and into the cool morning air. The desert was silent, as if holding its breath, and every step they took away from the ranch felt like a step toward safety, toward hope. Miles later, he reached the hidden tribal camp where watchful eyes widened with relief at the sight of the missing girls. As they ran to the arms of their people, the rancher stood back, watching the reunion with a quiet ache in his chest. He returned to his cabin alone, but it was no longer the same. That night had carved courage into his heart and filled the emptiness of his lonely life forever.